Well, it's great to be here to see friends and family, people who I worked with 20 some years ago at the University of Arizona, clients and colleagues. So thanks for having Giving USA report. This is something at this time of year, we kind of go on the road to talk about the Giving USA report, which is the definitive report on philanthropy in the United States. And so we're pleased today to bring that to you. And so thanks to AFP Southern Arizona, thanks to the YWCA. You of course know Cheryl, and I want to introduce Jen Daynard, who is a consultant with the Phoenix Philanthropy Group as well, who is based here in Tucson. And so we're all happy to be here with you today. You've heard a little bit about the Phoenix Group, but we are a firm that has been around now about 19 years. 19 professionals who have been chief development officers, CEOs, chairs of nonprofit boards. We're based both in Arizona and California, and we work nationally and internationally in the higher education arena, but in all sectors, and in fact, all the sectors that you'll see featured in the Giving USA report. We are a part of the Giving Institute. We are the only firm based in the Southwest United States that is a part of the Giving Institute. And so that leads us to being able to bring the report to you on a regular basis. I serve as a member of the board of directors of the Giving Institute, and our firm are donors and participants in the research that goes along with the Giving USA report. So for the Giving USA report, it is the longest running report and the annual report on philanthropy in the United States. It tracks the giving and amounts received by different types of organizations. So sources of giving, and then the type of organization that receives it. It is supported by the Giving USA Foundation and the Giving Institute, and it's been around since 1956. And it is funded by Giving Institute member firms like ours, as well as other institutions that support it. And it is produced by the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about the Giving USA report, and there are lots of stats. So be ready. All of those of you who like a lot of details and a lot of stats and our numbers geeks, you're really going to be thrilled with this part. Cheryl's going to talk a little bit about a recent report on Giving Tuesday and generational giving. And then we're both going to come back and talk about some key pointers, our kind of top 10 takeaways from the report and what that can mean to your work every day in your fundraising and your management experience. So as we look at giving in 2022, after 2020 and 2021, which were challenging years socially and economically with COVID and social unrest, generosity grew significantly during those 2 years. However, in 2022, giving was challenged. For the first time, inflation really took its toll in terms of overall. So as I look at and seek to define giving in 2022, in terms of concern, fatigue, normalcy, and resilience. In terms of concern, there is concern about the economy, about inflation, market volatility, personal finances, and wealth. In terms of fatigue, a number of donors really stepped up to the plate in 2020, 2021, again, because of COVID, social unrest, the political climate. Those issues are not fully behind us, but a lot of people wanted to step back from that and seek normalcy in their everyday lives, but seek normalcy also in the way they chose to invest their philanthropy. So a bit of a desire to put COVID and its health social behind us and to move on. And resilience, US generosity in the United States is amazingly resilient. Over the past 40 years, it's only gone down 3 times. And we'll talk a little bit about when that did happen. But it is resilient, it will come back. But the headline for this year is that total giving is down. So in 2022, total giving went down. It was at $499 billion. It declined $17.32 billion from a height of 2021. When you look at that in terms of percentages, the giving was down an average of 3.4% decline. And when adjusted for inflation, it was down approximately 10%. For those of you that have heard me speak about the Giving USA report or read the report, I've never discussed the terms about inflation adjusted dollars. We've always talked in terms of current and real dollars. This is the first time we're going to be talking about inflation adjusted because of the significant impact that inflation adjusted did have. So there were declines in 1982, since 1982, there were declines in 1987, in 2008 and 2009, and then again in 22. So it does speak to the resiliency of philanthropy in the United States, but it also, as we look at 2022, does speak to the issues of concern, fatigue, normalcy, and resilience. So where did that money come from? In terms of individuals, they comprise 64% of total giving in 2022. Foundations, including independent, community, and operating foundations, was 21%. Bequests were 9%, and corporations were 6%. And as you look at individual giving, when you combine outright giving with bequests, with donor advised funds, and personal and family foundations, you see that it's 85% of the total overall. In terms of individual giving declined. It was at $319 billion. It was a decline of 6.4%. And in inflation adjusted dollars, it went down over 13%. This includes itemized and non-itemized deductions from individuals in gifts of cash, securities, and property. A lot of giving by individuals is driven by mega gifts, those large gifts that can skew the percentages just by one gift. And of course, Mackenzie Scott was the leader in the mega giving category in 2022 and continues to lead that. And mega gifts from Mackenzie Scott and others counted for approximately $14 billion of the overall individual giving total. In terms of foundations, foundation giving was up. Again, this includes independent, community, and operating foundations. It increased 2.5% to $105 billion. In terms of bequests, that also went up to 2.3% for a total of $45.6 billion. And this is the most volatile category. One person of significant wealth can pass, and you'll see spikes and peaks depending on that. And usually then it is counterbalanced by foundations. So if there is a big increase in bequests in one year, you'll likely see an increase in foundations the next year because of people of significant wealth putting their estates into foundations. Foundations are looked at in terms of three levels of category. One is 10 million and above. One is 1 to 10 million. The other is below $1 million in terms of the value of the bequest. Those that are 10 million and above account for $24 billion. Those that are 1 to 10 million are about $9 billion. And those that are almost $12 billion. So that to me speaks to watching the millionaire next door. Those people who may not have significant resources to give outright to you during life, but in death, can give significant resources to you. In terms of corporate giving is up. It's estimated to be it grew by 3.4%. It's at $30 billion. Corporate giving programs, as well as grants and gifts made by corporations and corporate. This does not include sponsorship, marketing, the other commercial oriented giving that corporations can be involved with. That comes out of their marketing departments, so that's not counted in this area. This was really driven by a growth in gross domestic product that went up in 2022. Also, corporate pre-tax profits went up significantly. But as Deb had asked the question ahead of time, is what does this comprise in terms of giving? You can see the total is estimated, again, it went up about 3.4 But of that, of the dollar amount that is in terms of corporate giving, about half of it is in kind. And half that in kind tends to be pharmaceuticals that go outside of the United States. So, a common refrain you hear from your board members is, let's go to the bank on the corner. Let's go to this corporation or that corporation. Well, we want to seek the generosity of all of our potential donors, but when you look at the piece of the pie, corporate giving is about 6%. And of that, 50% is in kind, and of that, 50% goes outside of the country. So as you look at 2-year trends, you can see that the biggest decline is in bequests. But again, that's the most volatile one that you have. And the biggest growth is in terms of corporations. So in terms of gross domestic product and corporate pre-tax profits, that really drove changes in corporate giving in 2022 and also in 2021. Also in 2021, you saw a number of companies step up to the plate in terms of their response to social unrest and social justice issues, and make a statement not only in terms of their advertising and their competitive positioning, but also in terms of their philanthropy. And when you look at this in terms of inflation adjusted numbers, it's relatively the same in the story. The biggest decline was in bequests and the biggest growth was in corporate giving. So if you look at this chart, it looks like individual giving has gone down from 81% of the total to 67% of the total. And if you're looking at just outright giving from individuals, that's the story. But as you know, the way individuals give now is much different than it used to be. Individuals give through their donor advised funds, through their personal and family foundations. They give through bequests. So again, giving from individuals is 85% of the total overall. And in my mind, that really speaks to how you drive your strategy on giving. If individual giving overall is 85%, well, that's what you put your primary focus. Foundations have seen significant growth and they're the second largest. Corporations, yes, have seen significant growth, but again, stand relatively around 5-6% on an ongoing basis. So where is that money going? In terms of religious organizations, they receive the largest share, that's 27%. Human services organizations are the second largest at 14%, followed by education at 13%. Grant-making foundations is 11% of the total, and health is 10% of the total overall. In terms of giving to religion is up. It is 27% of the total. It increased by 5.2% to $143 billion. There are some interesting trends in religion overall. And we'll show you a chart that over the years, the percentage of giving to religion, and this is organized religion. These are congregations, churches, that type of thing. It's gone down as a percentage of the total, while it does continue to grow. And you're seeing obviously changes in the way people quote unquote consume their religion. Before COVID, you were seeing a decline in the number of people who were actively participating in congregational or church services, other types of religious services. With COVID and the ability to participate virtually, participation started to go back up a little bit. And Cheryl's going to talk a little bit about some trends with different generations and how they view religion and how they give to religion, which is pretty surprising. You're seeing some uptick again in terms of that, and it tends to be facilitated by virtual church or religious services that people can go to, and then an opportunity to participate and give during those virtual services. In terms of human services, it went down. It's 14% of all donations. It's relatively flat. So it went down by 0.6% to about $72 billion. And one of the things you're seeing here is that online revenue for hunger and poverty relief organizations increased by 14% in 2022 and 35% in 2021. And that is something that we're seeing a significant growth in human services and a more immediate reaction to need and opportunity to give. We'll talk a little bit about the trend toward giving occasionally versus monthly. I think that is driven in part by a more tendency and a more ubiquitous messaging about opportunities to give in response to immediate need. As you look at education, education went down. It's 13% of the total. It fell 3.6% to $70 billion. But higher education, which is a key component of this, which comprises about $60 billion in the total, higher education went up. Higher education saw an increase by 12.5%. In terms of foundations, foundations went up. It's 11% of the total. It increased a little over 10% to $56.84 billion. As you look at health, it is 10% of all donations. It increased 5.1% to $51 billion. And when you look at public society benefit, first a definition. This is kind of a catch-all category. This includes human rights organizations, social justice organizations, advocacy, United Way, commercial donor advised funds. So there's a lot of things that are included in this. It's 9% of the total. It declined 8.4% to about $47 billion. And the primary decline was because people were really activated during 2020 and 2021 to give to social justice organizations. And as we know, those problems persist, but you're not hearing about it with the same level of intensity as you were in 2020 and 2021. So people took their foot off the gas a little bit and declined in giving to those social justice organizations decline. In terms of international affairs, it's 6% of all donations. It grew 11%. It's at $34 billion. Two factors drove this. Number one, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And number two were the floods in Pakistan. And you're seeing those trends continue with regard to giving related to Ukraine in this current year. In terms of arts, culture, and humanities, that is 5% of total giving. It increased by 2.9% to $24.67 billion. The growth here is largely driven by high net worth individuals going back to their pre-COVID giving patterns where they were supporting art organizations. Now, during the time of COVID, when they weren't participating, when they weren't going to museums, they weren't going to concerts or ballets, they continued to give because they knew that they needed to continue to support organizations. But now they're back and actively participating. So giving is going up to correspond with an increased level of activity. Giving to environment and the animals went down. It's 3% of total giving. It declined by 1.6% to $16 billion. If you look at the 2-year trends, you can see that the smallest growth is in human services and public society benefits. And the two biggest winners are arts, culture, and humanities, and international affairs. And arts, culture, and humanities, again, high net worth individuals returning to their pre-COVID giving patterns, and in international affairs, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And in terms of inflation adjusted dollars, that story is the same. So this is the chart that shows the decrease in the percentage of giving to religion overall. Religion had comprised 58% of total giving. It's now 29%. Education has gone up. It was averaging around 11. Now it's 14%. Human services is around 14%. And education and human services go back and forth in terms of the number 2 position that they have. And so the trends in giving to religion, again, are showing that overall giving to organized religion is going down. But this does not include faith-based organizations like hospitals or human services organizations or universities or, K-8 schools or whatever. This is just organized religion. Those other ones fall under education. healthcare, human services. So what drove some of these changes? Number one is the gross domestic product went up in 2022. And as we look at giving as a percentage of gross domestic product in 2022, it was 1.9%. In 2020, it hit its high of 2.3%. So people dug deeper in 2020 as a percentage of the gross domestic product or the level of productivity of our country overall. Philanthropy increased. It has slipped back a bit to kind of pre-COVID norms. As we look at giving compared to charitable giving, or giving as opposed to the Standard & Poor's index and the stock market, there's a direct correlation between the strength of the stock market and giving. This largely impacts individual giving. You know, we all know what our portfolios are doing or not. And it also impacts corporate giving significantly because of how they invest their money. There tends to be a lag. So there's a lag in the change of the market by anywhere from 6 to 12 to 18 months. And giving, the changes in giving is not as volatile as the change in the market. But the Standard & Poor's index declined 25.4% in inflation-adjusted dollars between 21 and 2022. This compared to a 10.5% decline in total giving for that same period. So again, market decline 25%, decline in giving at 10%. It's not as intense. But one key thing is that that market decline was the most significant in the fourth quarter of 2022 when people are making their year-end giving decisions. Thus, you saw a pretty significant increase, a decrease in giving in that period of time. As you look at disposable personal income, this is what we have to spend after taxes. It's been relatively flat. But individual giving as a percentage of disposable personal income was 1.7% in 2022, a decline compared to the previous year where it averaged about 1.8%. Corporate pre-tax profits went up. They went up for 2 years in a row. That impacted corporate giving. You saw the increase in corporate giving that directly corresponded to that. And then in terms of the number of nonprofit organizations, our competition continues to increase. In 2022, there were 1.48 million nonprofit organizations. That was a growth of 3.4% over 2021. So that's a quick look at the Giving USA numbers. So the story, again, total giving in 2022 is down. It went down $17.32 billion, which is 3.4%. It was because of concern, fatigue, normalcy, and resilience. And what we hope wins out is that resilience factor, which has been proven over the years of this report to be the primary strength in the philanthropic sector. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, who's going to talk about Giving Tuesday and then some stats with regard to generational giving.
Thank you, Richard. And we will have some time for questions when we finish. So be thinking about those. It's great to be here and good to see everybody. And hear not terrible news, probably nothing that let's didn't really expect. So how many of you here are your organization participating in Giving Tuesday? Okay, well, with all of your efforts and your efforts of your colleagues around the country, people contributed $3.1 billion on Giving Tuesday in 2022. And so in addition to the Giving USA report, the Giving Institute conducted a special survey of Giving Tuesday to see if it really is providing the results and the change and the giving that organizations are hoping to. So 2022 was the 10th anniversary of Giving Tuesday, and giving was up. Wow. So it's interesting, even though overall giving perhaps was down as individuals, giving was up 15% over 2021. and over 25% greater than it was in 2020. So perhaps being its 10th anniversary, people are starting to respond to Giving Tuesday better. They understand what it's all about. Maybe they look forward to participating in some of the contests and rankings and all of the things that are going on. 6% more people gave on Giving Tuesday this year than in previous years. So hopefully you saw in your efforts some of those positive results as well, to encourage you to kind of keep doing that for this year. So as Richard said, another report that the Giving Institute put together in 2022 was Giving by Generation. They last did this report in 2016. And so a lot of the statistics now are able to see some trends of how generations may be changing as they are all getting a little bit older. One of the differences in the 2022 report is that there is a new emerging generation that we're talking about. In 2016, there was not there weren't records kept or giving data on Gen Z because they were born in 1997 to 2012. So in 2022, these are the people that are now between 10 and 25 years old, and they are starting to give. And so you'll see some of their numbers in the report. The millennial generation was reported in 2016, and we're fairly young then. Millennials, as many of you in this room probably know, because you are them, are between 26 and 41 years old. They're followed by the Gen Xers, who, again, many of you in the room probably know Gen X, okay? Well, I will be here for the next generation. The Gen Xers are 42 to 57-year-olds in the room. And we are still hanging on with those boomers. Boomers? 58 to 77-year-olds who are in the room and are still influencing philanthropy. So millennials, as you can see, are definitely emerging as a force in philanthropy. They are they're giving us up 40% from what it was in 2016. A lot of that could have been because in 2016, maybe they were just entering their careers, maybe just finishing college. Now, 6 years later, they're firmly ensconced in careers. But that is something that we're seeing with the millennial generation is really giving more and, as you see, engaged quite a bit more as well. Boomers are declining in their philanthropy, possibly because as they are getting older, they have additional financial concerns that they're dealing with, trying to take care of family, maybe working with younger generations. But that is the area that they gave the most in terms of an average gift of about $2,500, but are giving less as a percentage overall. So in terms of volunteering, which probably does kind of go along with a lot of the giving, as you know, the people who volunteer to you often are your greatest donors as well. Millennials are volunteering the most. Volunteerism has decreased from 2016, a lot of that due to the pandemic, where people quit volunteering and are now starting to get back into it. But millennial giving or volunteering is down only about 3% from where it was in 2016. Boomers, on the other hand, are down significantly in their volunteering. Again, probably started during the pandemic and are not really getting back into it yet. Again, maybe due to some health problems or other obligations, but down nearly 50% over what they were volunteering in previous years. We talked a lot about giving to religious and faith-based organizations. That remains the primary recipient of philanthropic dollars. And what is interesting is that it is the millennials who are really leading that. Millennials are the only generation that has increased attendance at church services. And so that is likely driving their giving, as you'll see coming up. Conversely, the groups that report never attending services, boomers are the highest, had the highest change. In 2016, only 15% reported never attending services. In 2022, 25% of boomers said they never attend services. And Gen X is right behind that, with 16% saying they never attend in 2016, and now 21% saying that they never. Of the millennials, only 16% of those now say they never attend church for this. So looking at where they are giving, again, places of worship lead for, and faith-based organizations lead for several of the generations. Gen Z are their highest giving is at places of worship. They're also giving to health and medical, and they are the only ones of the group who are doing that, as well as environmental, which is interesting. Or actually, Gen X are also giving to health and medical. Gen Zs are the only ones who environmental giving is in their top categories. Of the millennials, again, places of worship and faith-based organizations are the top two categories where they are giving. Followed by nonprofit hospitals, which could have a religious component there as well. In terms of Gen X, very similar, also giving to places of worship and faith-based organizations, and then kind of U.S. health and medical organizations in general. And then in terms of the boomers, they're the only ones for whom education is still one of their top three areas of giving, but they're also giving to places of worship in their faith-based organizations. So technology is making a big, oh, yes.
Do they assess the geographic location of respondents?
No. It's not tracking this report.
But, I think, so what you're getting at is that particular maybe the religious giving is higher in some parts of the country than in others. I wouldn't, again, they're not tracking that, but I would imagine that has a big influence. So the ways that people are giving have certainly changed since 2016 as technology has advanced. The percentage of donors who have a desktop computer is high overall, highest with boomers who are probably relying on their desktop computers more than other generations are. Almost all of them, as you can see on the right, are using a smartphone. And so perhaps using that to make their giving work. And then those who are giving through a charity website on their smartphone or tablet is higher in the younger generations than it is in some of the older generations. But since 2016, giving online has increased for every generation across the board. It has become a much more predominant way for people to give. So looking at what are the influences that are causing people to give, probably not a surprise, social media is influencing younger donors more than it is older donors. And those who are giving by text are much higher in the younger groups, and even some of their slightly older people that they're working with. Only 3% of boomers report giving by text, but only 7% for Gen X and millennials. So that's something that is perhaps not quite caught on as yet, but probably making some moves forward. Direct mail still remains strong. Nearly 50% of all groups are influenced to give when they receive direct mail. And I found it interesting. I mean, my first thought was that, well, of course, boomers are leading in this category, but it's actually the millennials who are responding at greater levels to direct mail that they're receiving than the other generations are. So direct mail remains a very important tool for giving. The percentage of donors who give online because of their direct mail piece that they've received is not quite as high, probably as people are influenced through an online channel. They're giving online more, yet they're still giving more online, or they're still giving online when they're getting direct mail, with boomers being the most likely to pick up their smartphone or their desktop computer and make a gift. So what this is saying is that, the website, if people are giving online or they're looking at your direct mail, they're directed to their website, it still remains a very important influencer to people's giving. And generations reported that seeing information on the website was critical to them making their decisions. And so, what this is telling us in looking at your strategy is that as you're doing your direct mail, as you're doing social media, anytime you can get people to go to your website and see what you're doing and read the stories, I think it's pretty clear. It's going to influence the giving that people are doing. So the people who are giving online in response to direct mail, again, is pretty high, nearly 50%, showing that it is motivating them to get online and make that contribution. And the people that prefer to give by mail instead of online is nearly the same, actually, slightly lower, but pretty close. The younger people generally prefer to go give online. The boomers are still sending me checks. So this slide shows us kind of the differences between the likelihood of giving by direct mail versus the likelihood of giving by email. Again, pretty close, looking pretty much at the statistics that we just saw. The likelihood of social media to influence giving, higher for the younger generations than for the older. Very similar with giving by text. The influence there is not quite as great for the older generations. And the likelihood to use giving a QR code. These are all becoming much more influential. We're seeing them more. A lot of organizations are using them. The younger generations are jumping on board and scanning those QR codes. Older generations, not quite so much, not quite so comfortable with doing the QR code and looking at that. So as you're planning your appeals, looking at who your target audiences are, that's something perhaps to keep in mind. In terms of how much our donors want to hear from us, the percentage of donors that would welcome at least a monthly communication is actually interestingly high for the younger generation. Not quite as high for the older generation. Where 20% of boomers said they would welcome at least a monthly communication. Those who would welcome a text, very similar, higher at the younger generations, dropping as we get down into the boomers, who are only about 23%. And then the percentage of donors, Richard alluded to this earlier, who prefer to give occasionally rather than being in a monthly plan. A little bit higher for, again, the younger generations. Generally, people prefer to give occasionally rather than being in a monthly strategy of giving, which really kind of influences how you look at your strategy for gaining recurring donors. We all want to have those recurring donors. We all want to know that money is coming in on a regular basis. But people are more likely to give based on a specific appeal, perhaps, or looking at a specific emergency that's coming up that makes them want to give. So what this tells us is that they do want to hear from all of you. They want to hear from the charities they support. They are using multiple channels, but they may not be as likely to be giving on a monthly basis as we look at. So in terms of public confidence, I was kind of surprised by this. I thought the confidence in charities would be higher. It still is only 50%, but for some reason it is not 100%. I haven't hoped. So whether that is because maybe they're not feeling they're hearing from charities enough, they don't know as much as what's going on. This could speak to a stewardship issue of really being sure to let the donors know how money is being spent and what impact it's making. But I think that's something to keep in mind, that even though we are doing good work, we still need to keep reminding our donors and our constituents about that. However, donors' belief in charities versus government, generally, they do feel that we are doing a better job of taking care of some of the certain problems themselves. So that's good news. And then finally, matching gifts are extremely motivating, particularly to millennials. 78% of them said that they were more motivated to make a gift to an organization if they're going to match and prosperity. And so that's something that, again, as you're planning your strategy and you're working with perhaps your corporate donors, your foundation donors, your major donors, thinking about positioning gifts as matching opportunities may help you reach your other donors. So with that, If they do, we're summing it all up.
All right. I'm gonna run through our kind of top 10 takeaways on this pretty quickly. And then we'll have kind of questions. As you kind of consider all of this information that we've shared with you, the Giving USA report, the generations and the First Tuesday information, here are our takeaways that we recommend to you to bring back to your office for implementation. First, rebalance a bit your portfolio of funding sources and donors. Individual giving is down outright, is down this year. Foundation, corporate, and bequest giving is all up. So pursue your sources in a balanced way, but remembering, as I said earlier, the fact that individual giving overall is still 85% of the total. Within those sources, within individuals, foundations, and corporations, economic challenges and economic strengths are not all the same across all those different sectors or sources. So some people in some industries are making money, some aren't. So go where the money is, understand and really research and go where the money is, and understand what industries, what individuals are having a particular strength. Partner with individual donors to optimize their giving options and potential. Again, this goes to the point about how individuals are giving through multiple different ways. They may give outright. They may give multi-year pledges, planned and legacy gifts, unrestricted, temporary, restricted, permanent, or restricted, cash, stocks, personal property, real property, trusts. As fundraisers, it's important for us to know all the different ways that an individual donor give and help to have that conversation with our donors about how they can optimize their giving through multiple instruments. Explore multiple funding options in partnership with other organizations' executives. This is something that we're seeing a lot more of, and we do occasional webinars, and we had a webinar about the important partnership between the Chief Development Officer and the CFO. This is another example of why that's important. It's likely that your organization's revenue sources, whether it be earned income, contributions, grants, contracts, endowment payouts, all fluctuate. And as they fluctuate during the year, it's important that your executive leadership team works together effectively so that you know if earned income is going to be down, can you make it up in contributed revenue? And balancing that portfolio overall. We've had clients who felt that they needed to look at projections for giving on a weekly basis. And at first I thought, how can you possibly project on a weekly basis what your revenue is going to be, what your cash flow is going to be? Well, they did it and they perfected it, and it was an extremely valuable tool. And so they could sit down with the CFO and the CEO on a weekly basis to be able to project contributed revenue vis-a-vis then all the other sources of revenue. So that when it came to current operations, much less bigger investments, they all kind of knew where they fit and how they needed to be prepared to complement one another in terms of generating revenue. Next, diversify revenue. We've talked about it, but also diversify your messaging, your fundraising priorities, your prospect and donor base, and volunteer leadership. It's diversification, but it's also flexibility. As you look at your organizations, think about those priorities that are going to be the most important, that are going to have the greatest impact. So maybe it's prioritizing those where you have the greatest impact. Maybe it is temporary prioritizing those that are going to have the most immediate impact, eliminating or deferring the others. Work closely with donors who have the most to give and the most flexible ways to give. But understanding that balance and in partnership with your executive leadership is important, and diversifying your revenue sources, diversifying your messaging, your strategy, and your volunteer leadership and your donor and prospect base is always important. And I know we're all trying to do that, some more successfully than others. Build the case for short and long-term funding. Much of philanthropy was directed and redirected to short-term funding needs in 2020 and 2021. COVID, social justice. Money was coming in and money was going out. It was being spent right away. As organizations further stabilized after COVID, it's important to identify programmatically, operationally, financially, what resources you need short-term versus what you need long-term. And bring your donors into that conversation, because they may have flexibility in the way they give. And if you impress upon them what your immediate needs are versus your long-term plans, they may adapt their giving based on what those needs are. Consider the opportunity for building endowment. We are seeing this as an opportunity that maybe hadn't been there in the last few years. 2020, 2021, money was coming in, money was being spent. During that period of time, donors also saw the volatility in organizational revenue and know that that long-term sustainability and strength is critically important. One key way to ensure long-term strength and stability is through endowment. So I think donors are more open to the discussion about endowment now than maybe they have been in the past, because they wanted to focus more on either immediate need, 2020, 2021, or new programs and initiatives before that. So I think that there are good opportunities with endowment. Be patient and persistent. Philanthropy in the US has only declined 4 times in 60 years. It went down in 2022, it's going to rise again. So, as I said earlier, some donors are making money, some aren't. Some are in the financial position and have the ability to give or the comfort in giving now. And that can vary by person, that can vary by sector, industry, geography, age, and more. So we all know that we're here to build those relationships for the long term. And in some cases, it means shifting gears towards stewardship as opposed to solicitation. It's not apologizing for asking for money when you need to, but it's being patient and persistent, because particularly with individual donors, it may take longer time to structure that right gift because of all the different ways, the different instruments, the different considerations that they need to make when structuring the right gift. So know your donor, not just their generation. Cheryl talked about generational issues, I think are all really important to take into consideration. And it's important to know and consider trends when we are working with a donor of a particular demographic. That needs to be in the back of our head. But ultimately, as you know, it's all about one-on-one contact and what motivates that one individual to give. Their generation is a consideration. It's not necessarily the primary driver. So one of the key takeaways, though, from the work that Cheryl reported on is that you can communicate often, and you should use multiple communication channels to do so. They want to hear from you at least on a monthly basis. They want to hear from you in a variety of different channels and in a variety of different ways. And they are tending toward wanting to give occasionally, not necessarily regularly. So I think that really calls into question our strategies of recurring giving, monthly giving, vis-a-vis regular communications, issue-focused communications, driving contributions on an occasional basis versus a structured basis. Participate in and leverage Giving Tuesday. Cheryl talked about that in her discussion about Giving Tuesday. But I think it's important to participate in Giving Tuesday for revenue, yes, but it's also for visibility and new opportunities. You know, plenty of organizations are having their own giving days. Plenty of communities are having their own giving days outside of Giving Tuesday. All of which is fine, but my recommendation is participate in them all, but be there for Giving Tuesday, because if you're not, somebody's going to miss the opportunity to give to you. So just be there, and you know, it may not be a primary revenue driver, and it certainly is not a strategy in and of itself. It's a part of the bigger, broader strategy. And finally, when in doubt, ask. Magda was talking about a part of her job that she loves the most is to be able to get to know your donor and listen to them and have a conversation with them. And I think that that's really true. And as you look at your donor and get to know them, have them help you structure the right ask. As fundraisers, we tend to spend a lot of time developing strategies to cultivate and solicit our donors. We're trying to figure out, you know, questions like, you know, will they be interested in capital or program? Would they consider operations? How much should we ask for? Who's all involved in the giving decisions? When should we ask? Well, we can spend a lot of time doing this or looking at our crystal ball. But, you know, bottom line, I think it is having your donor be a part of the process of structuring the right gift. They want to invest in organizations, they want to invest in causes, they want to have true impact in the community. You can help them optimize their impact in the community. You can help them optimize their impact in the organization by structuring the right gift. And that to me is in part by asking and having a conversation about how best to structure the relationship and the gift. So that's a lot of information.